So I recently created this scene using botanic assets, and I used a variety of scattering techniques that made the scene really work. I learned a lot, and I figured, you know what? I need to make these geometry node setups as assets, which I can use in my asset browser to just drag and drop into my new scenes that I make and save myself a bunch of time so I don't have to recreate these setups every single time. Once I did, I came up with 3 basic geometry node setups. And I figured, why not give this as a free download, because this stuff is awesome and I know you guys will love it. But in this video, I will walk you through creating each of these 3 things so you can actually learn for yourself how they're made and understand them better so that you can tweak them and improve on them yourself. So the first of the 3 is the one with camera culling, which basically uses rays out from the camera and only creates instances or scatters objects where the camera is looking. So if I'm looking through the camera view, I can't really tell that things are popping in or out of existence, except for on the outside of my frame. And you can increase how far out things are created. We'll get to that later. So that's really handy if you have very busy scenes and you don't want an entire landscape populated with stuff, or if your camera is moving through a scene and you only want stuff to populate where the camera is looking, not anywhere else. It saves a lot on your computer processing power. Next is just a super simple scatter. This has a maximum density setting and then a density factor you can fade up or down from that maximum level, and of course minimum and maximum scale randomization for each instance. And lastly is a weight painting scatter, where you can literally paint custom where you want stuff to populate and not where you don't want it to populate. It's completely customizable, and you can paint half weight to make less stuff scatter, or full weight to make it scatter more in that area, and everywhere in between. Once you've done your weight painting, you still have the same density settings as before, where you can control the maximum density and the minimum maximum scale randomization. Now let's get started with the basic scatter, then we'll do the weight painting, and then we'll do the more advanced camera culling version. So with a blank Blender file open, let's press Shift A, make a plane, tab into edit mode with your tab key, S, and let's do 10. So we just scaled it up by a factor of 10, and this is going to be our ground plane we're going to scatter some trees on. Speaking of which, let's make some trees. So to make this super basic dummy tree, which is really just a placeholder for better trees you can find later. Like I said, I love the botanic collection. The trees are really high quality. There's a bunch of different options. There's even seasons and a bunch of other great tools to create lots of trees. It's hard to find free trees, but I'll do my best to find some and put the link in the description down below. So Shift A, let's create a cylinder, tab in edit mode, S, Shift Z, so we can scale it on the other axes, but not Z, GZ1, enter. So we just moved it up by 1 unit. We get a side view. We can see it is starting at the origin point right here in the bottom. That's good. Let's grab this top face, move it up a little bit. Next, let's Shift A and make a cone, GZ to move that up, Shift D, Z, and move your mouse up. So we just duplicated and moved it up on the Z, and then S, drag your mouse in a little bit to scale that in, maybe move it down, GZ, and then another Shift D, Z to duplicate it, move it up on the Z, and S to scale it down a little bit. Now let's grab this top face of the trunk and just move it down inside. There we go. That's our super basic dummy tree placeholder. Okay, and now just for color's sake, let's make a green texture, and then let's make a second texture that is going to be brown. Tab into edit mode, click on the cylinder, Control L to grab all the linked faces, click on the wood material, and click Assign. There we go. Let's name these real quick. Let's move this tree up here out of the way so we know that's the original tree, and they're going to get scattered all over this plane right here. Let's split our view to get geometry nodes on top. To do that, put your cursor right on the corner where it turns into a crosshair, click and drag down. Switch your editor type to Geometry Nodes Editor, click New, and let's type in Basic Scatter. In to get rid of the side panel. And on my mouse, if I click on my mouse wheel, I can actually pan around, whereas if I roll my mouse wheel, it's the zoom. So it's very handy for navigating around. You can also use plus and minus in your keyboard to zoom in or out. We're going to make 3 nodes. That's all we need to start scattering this tree. Oh, before we do that, let's name our cylinder tree. And then let's, with it still selected, it's up here, it's selected, press M and move it to a new collection called trees. There we go. Okay, we have to have it in a collection so that later we can add other trees in that collection and they'll all be scattered. So click on your plane again, Shift A, type in distribute points on faces, drop that in the chain. There we go. We've got a bunch of just place holding points that we can use for anything. Okay, next type in instance on points. Make sure you don't do instances to points, but we want the instance on points. Okay, now the instance in this instance is going to be the tree collection. So click on the tree collection from the outliner here on the right, drag and drop it. I love that. And now before we plug stuff in, let's make sure our settings are very low so we don't crash our computer. I've had things get crazy and just stuff freeze. So put your density down to really low to 0.01. Check separate children and reset, and then check pick instance. Once those four things are done, you can plug instances into instance. And there we go. We got 4 trees. Nice. Hold shift, click on the density, and slowly drag it up. Holding shift allows you to more fine tune a slider or value so that you don't get crazy and crash your computer. Now these are really low poly, so that makes it very easy. But if these are high poly already, my computer would probably start slowing down with this many trees. All right, now let's get some random scale and random rotation. I'm going to move the collection right there. Shift A, type in random value. There we go. Now we only want to randomly rotate the trees on the Z axis. Now with these trees, you won't be able to tell, but with a real tree asset, there's branches and asymmetry, and you'll see the rotation. It'll make the trees look more random. So to get just the Z of the random number, Shift A, click on search, type in combine XYZ, plug in random value into Z, and then get the final output of that and plug it into rotations. Now, the max, I'm going to do 360. I'm not sure if that's degrees or not, but I'm just going to type in 360. All right, now they all have a random Z rotation. If I grab something on the original and just extrude it, look, they're all pointing different directions. That's great. That's what we want. Next, we're going to get a random scale. So you can just Shift D that random value, but make your maximum like 2 and your minimum 1, because this is just scale amounts, right? If you do a scale of 1, it's the same. Nothing's going to change. But a scale of 2 will, of course, be twice as big. So we can plug that into scale, and now they are all randomly being scaled. If we drop our minimum, you'll see that there's teeny tiny ones. Oh, don't go negative. And there are big ones. Okay. I'm going to do a minimum of 0.5 up to maximum 1. There we go. So the biggest they can get is normal size, and there's also some small ones. All right, that is it for the basic scatter, right? 3 nodes up here is really all you need to get the scatterer going. These are just some randomization features. Let me show you how to add a little bit more control for these. And once we do most of the work here, we're going to copy and paste this kind of foundational work for the other 3 scatter modes. It'll save us a lot of time. Change random to Poisson disk. Now this allows you to set a maximum scatter and then the density factor within that. I think this is actually the distance between each tree. So that's cool. If you have objects, you don't want them to collide with each other. Like turn this up all the way. Let's go to above view. See if we can get the settings set to where no trees are touching each other. There we go. There are almost no trees colliding with each other. So we can turn up maximum density up to a certain point. We don't actually see anything happen above 24 or so because they're all meeting that minimum distance requirement or maybe maximum distance. That's really cool. So just a little tip there, if you're using rocks or something like that, you don't want them to collide or stick into each other. That's cool. And we still have this density factor from 0 to 1, which I like. I'm just going to leave distance minimum at 0 and maximum is like the most dense I would ever want it to get. And then I'm going to turn down my density factor so it doesn't get crazy. There we go. So I can go all the way up or down. Okay, now let's put some controls here so that we can access this in the modifier tab where geometry nodes actually is over here on the right. So to do that, let's control our density maximum, our density factor, maybe a seed if we want to randomize that. And you'll notice on the right, there's things popping up, which is these same controls, just like a node group. Don't really care to control the rotation randomization, but I would like to control the scale minimum and maximum. There we go. And you can, in the in panel, if you type in, go to group, you can actually name these. So we want minimum scale. Definitely name these if you're getting a lot of stuff because it will get confusing and you'll forget what is what. So seed is the complete random generation of each scatter of trees. And we've got the controls over here for minimum, maximum. Very handy. All right, also let me show you how to layer 2 different scatters onto one plane. So we have one scatter, which is just the trees, right? It's all of these guys right here. I can select them all and press Ctrl J to put them in a little frame, which makes them just nice and organized. And let's make another scatter of some grass. So real quick, I'm going to put my 3D cursor right here where the tree is. Shift A, make a little plane. We're going to turn this into a blade of grass. So tab in edit mode, RX90. I can move it over here out of the way. Tab in edit mode, GZ1. I'm going to make this super skinny, right? It's a blade of grass. And I'm going to grab this top edge right here, GZ, move it down, and make it real skinny. Control R to make some loop cuts. Grab this top one, turn on proportional editing, which is letter O, and watch what happens. When you move an edge, now there is kind of a radius. Let me size it down by rolling my mouse wheel up. See this? It's moving other, edges around it, depending on how big that radius is. So I'm going to make my radius about as big as the grass blade. Do that, maybe like rotate a little bit. Just a nice way to get some kind of organic looking shapes. Shade smooth. Put that green tree texture on it. Okay, so that's our blade of grass. Make sure our scales are all 1. Yes, they are all 1 over here. If they're not, Control A, apply scale. All right, so let's layer on a second scatter. And you don't have to do anything again, right? Grab all this, Control D, put it down here. This is going to be our grass. You do need to change a few things, though. We need to put our blade of grass, which is over here, plain 001. Name it grass blade. And move it to its own collection. M, new collection, grass. That's a plural word. Grasses? Never thought about that. Okay. Go back to our plane. You can just click on the tree scatter. It'll get you to the geonodes right here. So this is our second scatter. Let's change this to grass. We do need to get the geometry data here, this original green one. Drag it down and plug it in there. And we need to join these together. To do that, Shift A, go to search, type in join. And you do join geometry right there. And we can drag the grass scatter geometry up and it'll join with the trees. Now I'm not seeing the grass here. Let's just check our settings. Zoom in here. Let's turn up our density factor. Oh yeah, there's the grass. Okay, so let's turn our maximum density up pretty high. Like that's pretty dense for me. Again, this is a low poly, so it's easy to do this. That's pretty cool. And maybe the grass is a little too big. So remember, I have control over the random scale. So maybe turn the maximum down to like 0.7, 0.5, and then the minimum to 0.25. So half that. Cool. So we have grass, which is randomly rotating on the Z. And with a few more random nodes like this with different seeds, you could randomly rotate X and Y as well, going both negative and positive just a little bit. So all the grass blades are not pointing straight up, but I'm not going to take time to do that in this video. So there we go. We've got the grass scatter. Let me give it a quick label and a color. I'm very visual, so this kind of stuff really helps me make that label big. Go click on this frame, give it a nice green color and really big label. Okay, grass, trees. Last cool trick I'll show you with this setup, and we'll move on to the other ones, is the switch node. I love the switch node. It's so cool. I just discovered it when I did that scene I showed you earlier. So put it right here and then Shift D, put it right here. So all this is a true or false on off switch. So if I turn the switch on, it goes to the true state, which is no geometry. Nothing's coming into the true. Only the false, which is the grass scatter, and this false is the tree scatter. So if I uncheck them, it's in the false position, and therefore the geometry goes through. It's just like a gate. It's an on switch, like a light switch. So we can actually connect the switch control to the node group here and node group there. Let's name them real quick. First is the trees, and second is the grass. Why would I do this? Well, again, when you're working with higher poly assets, the ability to just do that is amazing. It's so handy. You don't have to change the density. You don't have to go in here and like turn stuff off or unplug things. You don't have to change any nodes. You just turn them on or off. And that's really, really handy. I love it. I don't think we have that in the texture. I don't think we have a switch node in the texture nodes, but that might be really handy. Okay, so we're done. Let's Shift D this whole thing over, Shift D X. Move it over to here. Let's do the weight painting one. This one's really fun and you're going to love it. And because an object can have multiple weight paintings, you could actually weight paint, custom paint in where the grass is, and then you can paint in another one where you want the trees to populate. Really handy. So let's go up to the top of the geometry nodes and click on this little double page thing. This makes an exact copy with a new name and new ID. So now this is going to be weight paint scatter. Give it a new name. So over here, if we click on this one, the first one, basic scatter, this one's weight paint scatter. Now you'll be happy to know we don't have to do barely anything to the actual geometry nodes, but instead let's go to the object properties over here. Let's increase the size of our 3D viewport, and we do need to go to weight paint mode right here. And now this mode is weird. If you go to a flat view, say 7, you can't actually paint in a flat view. I don't understand why. That seems better to me. But if you press numpad 5, it's still the top view, but now we have 3 dimensions, right? They actually have the perspective and parallax, whereas we didn't before. But when you have a true 3D view like this, you can actually paint. So switch your mode again to weight painting mode and weight at maximum. Let's just paint. If you look over here, it created a vertex group, which is good. That's our weight painting I just did a few strokes on, but I can't actually see it. Why? Well, because the geometry nodes is something's missing, and I take it back what I said earlier, but watch this. All you need to do to see the original plane, which is where weight painting is on, we can't see it, is click on geometry. This is actually what I'm holding right now, is the plane geometry data of the original plane. Move it over and join it with the scattered one. There we go. Now we can see the weight painting. And I'm actually going to turn off trees and grass so I can see my weight painting easier. Okay, so I'm painting. I'm not seeing anything. What's going on? It's all blue. It should show red and orange and yellow when I paint. One more thing we got to do is we need to actually add polygons to this flat plane. If I tab into edit mode, there's literally one face. The whole plane is one face. You need geometry for vertex groups, which is also weight painting. So in edit mode, with this face selected, this one single face, type F3, type in subdivide. There we go. We got 4 subdivisions with a subdivision factor of 1, or number of cuts rather. Let's put this at 20. 20, enter. There we go. Lots of faces, which will allow us to paint with more detail. The smaller the faces, the higher resolution your weight painting will be. Now I'm going to switch back to weight paint mode and see what happens. There we go. We got a heat vision painting going on. That essentially blue is 0 and red is 1, or full power, or whatever you're going to use this for. The colors in between are the in-between values. So if we put our weight down to 0 right there, we can paint a factor. We can paint a value of 0 over everything to reset it. And weight at 1 gives us a full powered paint value. So I'm just going to paint like a shape so we can see where the trees are and where they are not. I'm going to do a G for my last name. Watch what happens when I press 7 for a flat view. I cannot paint. So annoying. But if I press 5 to go into like 3D above view, I can paint. Blender, Y, just Y. Why is it like that? Okay, that's a nice G. Okay, so let's get out of weight painting mode back to object mode. And what we need to do is go to your modifiers. Now remember, geometry nodes is just another modifier, just like bevel, subdivision, and all the other ones we love. So what we're going to control with that weight painting is the density factor. So instead of putting a number in here, we're going to put an attribute. So click on this little plus thing over here, and then click on the empty space, and we're going to put in group right there. That's actually this guy that we just painted on, and I should have labeled this earlier. Weight for trees. There we go. Weight trees. And there it is. Weight trees. Awesome. So now our weight painting will basically be a value, replace that number value, and control the density. Now we don't see it right now because we haven't turned off. So look, if we turn it on, boom, we got our G of trees. Grass is filling everything, because remember, the grass has its own scattering node setup down here that does not care about our weight painting. Not yet, at least. So if we want to add a separate weight painting just for the grass, let's go back to object properties, make a new one, do weight grass. With that one selected, go to weight painting, and I'm just going to paint over here. Grass over here for some weird reason, just in between, nowhere else. There we go. Back to object mode, go to modifiers, and we need to control the density factor of the grass, which is right here. Remember, the yellow is my grass frame, green is trees. So on this node, grab the density factor, scroll it on up here, plug it into the node group, bada boom, bada bing, it's right here. Click on this input attribute toggle, which basically changes it from a number value control to a attribute control. And then go to weight grass. And there we go. We have grass only where we want it, which is in between the trees and not under the trees. Awesome. Okay, hopefully I didn't mess up anything or lose you there, but let's move on to the third one, which is probably the most advanced, but it's actually not that advanced. So maybe this weight painting was more advanced. We'll see. So I'm going to copy this original one here because remember, this one has like the attributes and the weight painting. We don't need that for this example, although you can totally combine them, but we're going to grab the basic one, Shift D, and move it over here. Remember, we got to name it in the geometry nodes up here, do the duplicate trick we did. Give the new copy a name, camera culling scatter. Now we need a camera. There is a camera. If we press numpad 0, it goes into our camera view. Here's a cool way to move this camera quickly over to where we want. I'm going to select this third plane, which we just made, press period on my keyboard, which centers it and zooms in a little bit. I'm using my mouse wheel on my keyboard to position to get a nice view. And then here's the trick. Control Alt numpad 0 to set your active camera to your 3D view. So it moved it from that default up here view to where my camera was viewing. Numpad 0, now it's looking at this third plane. So here's a little bit of a weird thing we have to do. We need to make a plane to fill the camera view. It's kind of strange, but I'm going to press Alt R actually just to reset the rotation of a camera, just to make this next step easier. We can easily re-aim the camera where we want it in a minute. So Shift S, cursor to selected, which is the camera. Now I can create a plane exactly right there. Shift A, mesh plane. Oh, the plane is populating elsewhere because it is over here in the grass collection. We don't want that. Move it up to this basic collection. Okay, GZ to move this plane down. And I'm going to tab and scale it on the X to be a little bit bigger than the camera view. See, these lines are the camera view, you know how wide it is or how zoomed in it is. And then SY. We want it to be a little bit bigger. I'll show you why in a minute. Now we don't want this square to render. So here's some cool tricks. Go to the object settings, go to visibility, turn off all of these, and then go to viewport display and change it to wireframe. So it just shows in the viewport as just a wireframe square. Now we need to parent this to the camera so that wherever the camera goes, the square moves with it. So first select that plane, second select the camera, then type Control P for parent and do keep properties. There we go. Now look, if I select the camera and just move it around, that weird square, which you have no idea why I made it, will always follow the camera. Now let's press numpad 0 and RR, which kind of allows us to freely rotate our camera. There we go. RR again to do that. And then 1R. Okay, I'm happy with that. Another trick for nice visualization to see what the camera is seeing is you can actually scale up the camera. By having it selected, type S and just move it up. Now this does not change what the camera sees or the render or anything. It's just the visible scale size of the camera object in the 3D viewport. So I like that because it helps me visualize what's going to be in frame, especially from an above view, which is numpad 7. Anyway, let's do the geometry nodes to set up this weird camera culling so that things will populate and scatter only within what the camera can see. Spoiler, we only need 4 nodes. You're probably breathing a sigh of relief because I have seen some way complex ways to do camera culling with like dynamic painting and like vector math, and I hate that stuff. I do not want to overcomplicate things because first of all, I don't understand it. So I don't want to do it, but I found a super easy way. So here's the 4 nodes we need. We need the camera inside the geometry nodes. So click on the camera object and drop it in there. Awesome. Next, we're going to Shift A, click on search. Type in position, the simplest of all nodes right there. Shift A, vector math, that second one, put it on subtract mode. And the 4th node is the ray cast. Shift A, search, ray cast right there. Make sure you don't drop it on top of other noodles because it will ruin them just like that. Okay. Now let's start plugging stuff in, shall we? Try to zoom in here. I'm sorry if I wasn't zoomed in earlier. I know I do that sometimes and you guys are like, I can't see stuff. So I'm sorry. I'm in front of a big screen. You're probably looking at a tiny phone screen, God forbid. So plug in location of the camera into the first part of this vector subtraction equation. And then the second part will be the position, which I think is a position of the plane. I'm not sure about that. There's a lot about geometry nodes I do not understand. It's very abstract to me. Next, the vector output, which I guess is like the answer to the subtraction. We're going to plug it into ray direction. As for the settings, we'll keep them all the same. I'm going to turn this one up to 500 and we'll play with that later to see what that does. Now, the only thing we care about here is the hit. Is hit. So is maybe the position of each tree. Is it being hit by the rays of the camera. Oh, I forgot one thing. We do have to have one more node in here. I'm sorry, 5 nodes. I think you'll forgive me. That's not bad. We need to include this funny, mysterious plane into the geometry node setup. So select it, name it camera color. There we go. Click on our scatter again to go back to the view and geometry nodes. It is parented to the camera. So if you don't see it, it's because it's inside the camera object as a child. There we go. Oh, come back. So click on the camera color, drag it in there. There it is. Now get that geometry data of the camera color and put it into target geometry. And now the only thing we need coming out of here is the is_hit data. Plug that into each distribute points on faces node in the selection input. It's pink right there. It's the second one. You can't miss it. At least in Poison Disk, it's the second one. I don't know if it's different in the other mode. I'm not going to find out now and screw up everything. So grab that is_hit and also put it into selection on your grass setup down here, the yellow one, and everything disappeared. Oh no, what happened? Well, we need to set our camera and color to relative. Oh my gosh, things are popping up. Now, what happens if we scale our camera color? Oh, you know what? We don't have geometry on this plane. The plane we're scattering on has one face, and that's just not enough. So similar to weight painting, the more faces you have, the higher resolution this culling will happen. I'll show you what I mean. If I add just a few levels of subdivision, let's do 6. There we go. I'm going to cull this down a little bit. If I select it and go over above, you can literally see the faces that are cutting off, right? It's like stair steps, choppy and very obvious. However, if we add more subdivision, let's do like 10. So, okay, maybe not that much. Let's go back to like 6 again. There we go. Now look at that. It's like a straight line. You can't really tell where the faces are. So it works much better. So you need to set your camera view, which whether you want it to be wide or zoomed in. I'll zoom in really tight to 100. It's a nice millimeter. I love my Canon 100mm lens, by the way. It's one of my favorites. And now we need to scale our color to basically match this, because right now if I go above my camera color, things are popping up pretty good right outside the view. But if it was too small, it would be too narrow. See, we don't want this. That doesn't look right. But if we scale it up, I'm actually in the camera view right now, and this is kind of cool to be able to see everything like populate. That's pretty good, right around the edges, right? Because remember, there's going to be shadows. There's going to be possibly reflections, depending on what you've got in your scene. And as the camera moves, this is really cool. Watch this. As the camera moves, things are literally being born and created and spawned in real time. That's like Unreal Engine stuff right there, I think. Pretty sure they have this feature. So if you can see stuff popping into existence in your animations or your camera movements, then scale up this color a little bit to give you some more grace around the edges. So that's it. Hopefully this tutorial wasn't too long. Hopefully this is your new favorite video on YouTube, because personally, this information right here is golden to me. I love making environments. I love scattering stuff. I love just drag and dropping stuff and creating endless varieties of natural or artificial scenes. So if you like this video, comment down below, go get the free download on my Gumroad and leave me a tip. Give me $1 or $2 if you really like it. If this is valuable to you and going to save you time. Speaking of which, turn these geometry nodes into assets, and you can literally drag and drop them in future projects. To do that, go to Blender file. The tutorial's not over yet. Hold on. Don't go yet. Switch your view to blend file so you can see all the data. Find there it is, my geometry node setup, and make it an asset. There we go. Make it an asset. And now you can use it in the asset browser. If you don't know how to use that, I'm not going to do that in this video. Watch my other 2 or 3 videos I have on the asset browser. It's a powerful tool. Now I just saved you a whole bunch of time, and you can just drag and drop these for your later projects. You're welcome. Share this video with every single person you know in your whole life. Hit that thumbs up button and subscribe and all that jazz. Thanks for watching. Have a great week scattering.